Good evening. I am Kirsten Johanna Allen, publisher and co-executive director of Torrey House Press, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to this special fundraiser and celebration for Hell's Backbone Grill and Farm and its wonderful owner chefs, Jen Castle and Blake Spalding. I am joining you this evening from Salt Lake City, homeland of Ute, Goshute, Paiute, and Shoshone peoples, and I invite you to consider the Native peoples and nations of your area. Tonight, we get to hear from 6 Torrey House Press authors who have been fed by Blake and Jen. Craig Childs, Pam Houston, Amy Irvine, Regina Lopez-Whiteskunk, Brooke Williams, and Terry Tempest Williams will share their stories of Hell's Backbone Grill, how they got to know Blake and Jen, and treat us perhaps with a short reading. In the early hours after Blake and Jen shared their urgent need for help with their community, Amy Irvine called these wonderful authors and me asking for help in making this evening happen to benefit Hell's Backbone Grill. So many people, so many of you made donations to the Hell's Backbone Grill GoFundMe, and we are all so happy to celebrate generosity that will help us all enjoy the community that Blake and Jen have created. I am delighted at this moment to turn the time over to Blake and Jen for just a moment to tell us a little bit more before we hear from our writers.
Hi, everyone. I'm Blake, and I want to really just thank Kirsten and Torrey House Press and all of our author friends that have gathered here tonight, and really everyone who's joined. I heard there's like over 600 people who may be watching tonight, which is kind of astonishing in and of itself, although not really when we consider the caliber of the authors that we have gathered here on behalf of our benefit. So I wanted to just say, and Jen and I, want to really communicate our gratitude and that it's been a vulnerable thing to be in this place, this position of needing to ask for help. And that, many of you know that it's been a hard few years for the restaurant. And I think the pandemic has really adversely affected most restaurants that aren't like either hyper funded investment group, really fancy restaurants, or sort of the more traditional, well, not traditional, the fast food end of the spectrum. So the middle restaurants are really having a tough time. And, we were very surprised this year to find ourselves in the position of where the math just didn't make sense, to use our friend Will's words. And really strongly considered that we would close. We decided we had to close, and then people started urging us to ask for help. And it was a tricky one. I think Jen and I had some really teary conversations where we're like, do we do this? Can we do it? Is it too weird, in a time where there's so much urgent need and we're facing a lot of complicated problems as a planet and a society? It felt kind of crazy to ask for help for a for-profit business. And yet people really urged us to, and so we did. I wanted to just say that from the beginning with our restaurant, which is now we'll have a 24th season, which will be opening in mid-March, but over the course of these many years, we've made all these friends with the incredible gift of telling stories. And what Jen and I really wanted to do was to help reinvigorate and revalue food by telling stories about it. Like, I think that if we can talk about our food, like, let's just say you, the listener, you grow a tomato plant, only a tomato plant. The tomatoes that you grow become extremely meaningful for you because there's a story associated with them. You know their origin, you know how they came to be. And so when you eat them, no matter what they taste like, they're going to taste better. They're going to be more nourishing in kind of a deeper way. And so our goal was to help to nourish people by telling stories about the food, by growing it there in the high desert around, as an inholding in Grand Staircase-Escalante National Monument, and to really value the people who worked to grow and cook and produce the food and to tell their stories. And so we worked that through daily interaction with our guests, but also with our cookbooks, which many of these writers, pretty much everybody had some hand in our cookbooks. And some of our friends, you know, like we met Amy and Brooke and Terry very early on, I think our first year with the restaurant. So we're very old friends now. And then some like are more recent, but it has always been about how do we really bring love and value and connection back to food. And now we have this whole new story about how all, you know, thousands of people showed up to help us try to save the restaurant, and we are deeply grateful.
I'm Jen Castle, and I'm really excited that we're giving next season a shot, and grateful to everyone who made that possible, and to this group for assembling and pouring the love on us. And it was all very uncertain, and I guess it still is in a larger way, but thank you so much for letting us have a 24th season. Thank you.
Blake and Jen, thank you. Thank you for feeding us. Thank you for sharing the vulnerability of needing help. We can all learn from that. And we're grateful to have you. I would like now to turn the microphone, the screen, the moment over to Craig Childs. Craig Childs is joining us from Colorado, where he lives. He's the author of many books, including several that Torrey House Press has been thrilled to be able to work with him on. Craig has a history with Hell's Backbone Grill that comes right into his very kitchen and becomes a real part of his holiday celebrations. And it's a joy. It's always a joy for me to be able to hear Craig speak and read. And thank you, Craig.
Yeah, thank you, Kirsten. Thanks for holding all this together. I know it's not easy to gather people, but it is important to gather. And I suppose I'm not going to talk too much about how we met. I mean, I've had kids at Hell's Backbone since they were little, so that's kind of my measurement, as I can imagine how close their noses were to the table. And Blake and Jen, thank you so much for having a place where that can happen, for having a gathering place, because especially now in the winter, you think about it, you think about how important gathering is, because it's so easy to drift apart. It's so easy just to go off into the dark, and we need to be able to come together. And what I'd like to bring up here is that we have a little bit of a tradition, maybe every year, every other year, whenever we can do it. We Amy and your husband Devin and the incredible Ruby, your daughter, will come over to our place, or we'll come over to your place, and for it seems like we did it on a Christmas Eve and on a Christmas night, and on this year it'll be New Year's, and we get together, and each one of us has a recipe from a Hell's Backbone cookbook, and that's the night where we eat marvelous things. And it's so beautiful because we're all in the kitchen, you know, steam and movement. I know it's nothing like the restaurant world, but it's our family world. My kids are there, Diva's there, it's a lovely moment, and it's an important moment, because it's much easier to be alone. It's much easier to be isolated and just say, I'm not going to open my door right now. I'm going to be in hiding. And to actually drive the drive through the snow or whatever it is, and find each other and do that work, turns out to be so important. And from our kitchen window on those nights, you look out, you're looking about 40 miles across Western Colorado into Utah, and there are only a few human lights out there, mostly pitch black. And I think about the little glow that we are that time of year, and how many little glows we all are in all of our various places. And thank you, Amy, for being part of that. I mean, thank you for coming over and indulging our fun, or letting us indulge it with you. I wrote a little something, based more about the landscape than about the food, because of how much you two are about that landscape, and how important that is, and the darkness that's out there, that the places that don't have all the human lights all over them, how important that is. Humans have enough places. We occupy enough large swaths of earth. What is perhaps the most valuable resource is where we are not. For our own sanity as a species, we need these dark spaces, but we are peripheral. They are needed on the surface of this planet, part of the living organism, as necessary as cloud formations or plate tectonics. As human lights spread, webbed among each of our coasts, growing like mold through the interior of the continent, these dark places become more important. They are the blood flow and the organs of the non-human world. That's where bears go, where forests gather, where seeds migrate. You don't want these places to thin or disappear. They are needed as much as water or food. In fact, that's what they are, water and food. The wild places are a sign of health on this planet. I think of Bears Ears in Utah, and how have you noticed that you spot the Bears Ears from so many different odd places? Driving up through northern New Mexico, you catch them through a gap, and it looks like a bear is climbing up to look over the horizon with its paws on the land, and you see it from northern Arizona. And I was just driving down to Dove Creek, Colorado the other day, and looked out the window, and there were the Bears Ears sitting right there. And so here's what I think should happen here, that any place that can see the Bears Ears should be inside of a monument. That the Bears Ears is almost more of a view shed than anything, and that view shed has these little clusters of human lights, but mostly it has the darkness at night, and grand Staircase-Escalante and all the dark between them, around them, the nameless places, monumentless monuments, the kind of dark you can taste. This is the true wealth of the world, not us alone, but everything else. The problem is we're becoming cheap and widely distributed, just turned 8 billion of us worldwide. And we can get you anything you want: plastic cups, sunglasses, motor cars, toothpicks, cheap flights, and all you can eat buffets by the millions. We can make you think that there was never another world but ours, never another time but now, and whatever comes next. And I love it. I bask in civilization. You should see me in New York City with a backpack. But that's only part of the world, a small part of it when you consider 350,000 named beetle species, 12,000 kinds of ants, when you consider the vast domes of Navajo sandstone and the flash floods that grind through every summer in the desert, places that are more themselves than ours. I get tired of us and them, don't you? Humans are something the earth made. We have beetles in our cities, ants in our houses. They have humans in theirs. The bedrock under the restaurant is Navajo sandstone. When the floods come, we listen to them roar. Tonight, my kids are going to be here. They're going to come walking through this door, and one I haven't seen for months. And we're going to fix dinner here. We're going to have a little gathering. And I'm looking out the window here, and it is just dark out there. There are some little clusters of lights of Crawford, Colorado, over that way, and then beyond that, just blackness, and the mountains that I can't see from here. My children were born right there at the base of that mountain in the dark. And then out beyond that is just more and more of this beautiful darkness where mountain lions track in and out, where bears are deep in hibernation, and where the aspens are standing quietly right now. So as soon as my kids walk through this door, I'm going to bow out early, because then it's time to fix a dinner and time for us to have a moment together. So thank you so much for giving us the space for this, and thank you for listening.
Thank you, Craig. Next, it is my joy to turn our time to Pam Houston. Pam Houston is the author of many wonderful books, including the recent memoir Deep Creek, and more recently Airmail, which she co-authored with Amy Irvine. The first, I believe it was the first in-person Torrey House Press event of 2020, was held in the lawn outside Hell's Backbone Grill, and Amy and Pam read from Airmail to an enthralled crowd. It was one of the high points of that difficult year for me. Amy and Pam have written letters to each other, and their letters show so much heart and so much love. And it's wonderful to bring them together in that book and in this evening. Pam joins us from her ranch I bet it's pretty cold up there in Colorado. Pam.
Hi, thank you. Thank you to all of you. I'm looking at these faces and I'm just thinking how meaningful all of you make my life. It's really like, I look at Terry, I have a photo of Terry and I in Salt Lake City when we do not look drinking age between us. We are so young that if you added up our ages together, we could not get a beer. And we're selling our first books like on a card table. and Amy and I, doing COVID together by mail. And Kirsten honestly healed my relationship with publishing. I'm realizing that more and more. So just, and Craig, of course, I love you. All of you, thank you so much for being my friends. We were going to tell a story and then read a little. I combined them. I wrote a little story. I sort of split the difference in that I did write it down, but it's kind of like telling because I didn't polish it. So this is just a little story. It was November 2020, November of high COVID, November of Biden's contested election, November after the murders of George Floyd and Ahmaud Arbery, the November of Kyle Rittenhouse being found not guilty, November of my being chased and run off the road by 3 dudes in a truck flying a giant Trump flag for the crime of driving a bumper stickerless gas-efficient vehicle, November of my long COVID, of nosebleeds that lasted a week or more, a galloping heart, severe joint pain, failing kidneys, of this disease that nobody was quite sure existed, running around my body like a poltergeist, and me waiting to see which organ it would hit up next. Also, it was the November of no travel since 2019. And to be perfectly honest, it was hard to tell whether it was the fear of imminent death or the inability to cross borders, state as well as national, that was driving me the most crazy. I say that at the risk of minimizing in your eyes the seriousness of my long COVID, at the risk of you thinking of me as a spoiled and privileged brat who lives adjacent to 100,000 acres of public land with a good man and a house and barnyard full of comedic and loving animals, and who still wants to travel. All I can do is fess up to the truth that while I did spend many hours making hearty soups and raising pullets and speaking convincingly about the unfamiliar joys of months and months at home, some very essential part of me was pacing from room to room like a caged cheetah, However shameful this might be, however climate unconscious, the motor that makes everything about me go is undiscovered landscape, unfamiliar flora and fauna, unnamed mountain paths and slot canyons, untraveled road, unexpected stories, the likes of which I have never heard before. My beloved ranch, the glories of which I have written about at length, had during COVID, and I'm not proud of this, become a kind of prison. Rural Coloradoans' first reaction to COVID was to buy a lot of guns. The second was to elect Lauren Boebert. And they were shooting those guns on all sides of us day and night and refusing to wear masks at the post office. Every time we went to the Kentucky Bell Market in a mask, the cashier would sneer, "You don't have to wear that thing in here." I tried to love it anyway. I didn't do so well. In July, I snuck down to Santa Fe to drive around in my Prius and wave to other liberals and to meet Amy Irvine for the first time. We ate green chili cheeseburgers from the window at the Shake Foundation, which we wiped vigorously with Clorox wipes before consuming. We stayed up half the night talking, sitting on folding chairs outside Amy's hotel room. I slept at my friend Dia's house in the back of my car. The next day, miraculously, I was invited to swim for an hour in my own lane in a pool. By November, with the election still undecided and all the countries I might flee to in the event of fascism still mostly closed, I had to go somewhere. It had to be drivable. It would be good if I didn't have to cross too many state lines. I browsed VRBO and Mike and I rented a house for 5 days under a cliff, a half a mile into Escalante Canyon. I found a ranch sitter. We packed the car. One thing I learned about myself during the pandemic is how much joy, life force really, I get from unexpected conversations with strangers, with friends, with the lady at the farmer's market, with the guy at the dump. Mike was the best pandemic partner I could have imagined, and I knew how lucky I was to be living in a place where we could hike every day. Lucky or not, my mental health in those days was as precarious as the world we found ourselves in. Brain fog so severe I could hardly make sentences didn't help. I hadn't listened to any music during the pandemic because I was afraid that if I did, I would cry. And if I started to cry, I was afraid I would never stop. So many people were dying alone. Not 12 months before, I had entertained the childish belief that most of our political leaders would not sacrifice hundreds of thousands of lives in order to make a killing in the stock market. That seems so naive now, but it didn't then, not to me. And that loss of innocence some days sat like an anvil on my chest. I had not called Blake when we decided we were coming to Boulder. No one was much going to see anyone then. No one wanted house guests. I think we might have still been sanitizing our mail. 5 hours into the drive, about an hour past Blanding, meandering along White Canyon, the long, beautiful descent to height, and the long, equally beautiful climb up to Hanksville, I decided I could risk it. We pulled over and I called Blake. "We're on our way to Boulder," I told her. "I rented a house in Escalante Canyon for 5 days. "Perfect," Blake said, as if dropping in on her for dinner during a pandemic, or any other time for that matter, was something I did weekly, was something I had ever done before. "I'm making lemony chicken pasta," she said. "If you're in Hanksville now, timing should be perfect. We can eat outside around the solo stove." I hung up the phone smiling so hard, and for the first time in 6 months, I thought my face might crack. I keyed up a 3-year-old playlist on my phone called "I'm Gonna Marry Mike Blakeman." Bono began singing "It's a Beautiful Day," and as I peered through the car windows, I could see that it really was. When the stair steps started singing "Ooh, Child," I started seat dancing, and Mike looked over at me very slyly, afraid if he acknowledged my several-notch elevation up out of depression, it might startle me like a prairie dog back into my hole. In the glorious light of an early winter sunset, we drove through all of the beauty that is Capitol Reef National Park, singing to Love Train and Message of Love. I melt with you and I'll take you there. It was true dark and 12 degrees when we coasted down Boulder Mountain to Blake's house. I don't remember if we real hugged or air hugged, but I do know we leapt up and down at the sight of each other. We wrapped up in blankets, took our positions around the solo stove, and Blake handed us steaming and generous bowls of lemony chicken pasta. I am here to testify that Blake's lemony chicken pasta is quite possibly the best thing in the universe. by which I mean I would definitely ask for it as my death row meal. We were careful not to direct the flow of our breaths into each other's faces. We spent a lot of words convincing each other that the solo stove, which in fact does not put out enough heat when it is 12 degrees, was keeping us warm. We talked and laughed and were so grateful every second to be talking and laughing. There might have been ice cream, which I know sounds ridiculous, but I think there was ice cream. And if there was ice cream, I know that we ate it. We stayed around that solo stove for hours until our teeth were chattering and we could no longer feel our limbs. At no other time in my life had I been both sick and sad for 6 entire months. At no other time in my life had I been lifted out of that place as quickly, as completely as Blake lifted me up with her lemony chicken pasta, by which I mean, of course, her friendship and her love. We spent 3 more nights that trip around the solo stove. We came back in December for 5 more days to do it again. What I'm telling you is that hiking those canyons of the Grand Staircase and eating Blake's delicious food prepared with so much love kicked my body into some further place where it knew it could get better and it wanted to. Even the words lemony chicken pasta in my mouth right now kind of make me want to get up and dance. This is why there is no other place like Hell's Backbone Grill and why it should be saved. The canyons and the restaurant are 2 expressions of the same deep and abiding big love, which is primarily for the earth's bounty. The canyons, the farm, the table, the ethics, the hellions, the desire to set an example, the desire to build a better world. You can feel how it all goes together in every breath you take when you were there. Many of you here tonight have spent a day in abject wonder of the Grand Staircase Monument and spent the evening doubling down on that wonder with a big bite of meatloaf. And I don't even have to say out loud that it healed something that needed healing inside you. If you have not availed yourself of this healing, I strongly recommend that you do. Thank you.
Pam, thank you. Thank you for expressing certainly an experience that I've had being fed in all of the ways by Blake and Jen's food. So grateful. Amy Irvine, who is the mother of this evening, helping us get this together tonight. She is the author of several books, including Trespass, Desert Cabal. She is a contributor to Red Rock Stories and, of course, a co-author with Pam Houston of Airmail. She has known Blake and Jen since the earliest days of Hell's Backbone Grill. Amy.
Thank you, Kirsten. Thank you, Torrey House Press, all things Torrey House Press. You're as much a glue for us as Blake and Jen are and all their hellions. I could say a lot about all the wonderful people that I'm sharing the screen with. All of you have had an enormous impact on my life. And my heart, it can hardly take it tonight, seeing all of you here together, especially for such a good cause, which is Hell's Backbone Grill and the 2 women that built it from the ground up. I'm going to read, the reason I have the cookbook on hand is not only so that I hope you'll all go straight to the website or to your nearest independent bookstore and buy the cookbook or any of the cookbooks, 2 of the cookbooks that they have, but because I'm going to read, I had the honor of being assigned the winter essay for the winter portion. It's a seasonal cookbook, and it is winter after all, the very thick of it. And I'm just going to move in and out of that and talk a little bit also on the side about Blake and Jen, because it has been since the beginning. Late afternoon, dead of winter, pale gold light seeps into the sky like pears strained through a sieve. Ice winks from branches of pinyon and sage, while mud, half frozen in bowls of bedrock, sucks languidly at my boots. The wind howls in notes of cadaverous blue. Everything else is muted now. Even the raven holds his crass tongue. In this cold brilliance, every resource save beauty is rationed. I feel a sharp new hunger I cannot name. I wrote this on the last day of 1999 while walking out in the newly established Grand Staircase-Escalante National Monument. I didn't know that that night my father would kill himself in Salt Lake, and that I would be at the restaurant right before Blake and Jen opened it as their own, celebrating the new millennium, knowing that my father wouldn't be there to see it through. And 2 months later, that was probably part of the reason that I quit my desk job at the Salt Lake office of the Southern Utah Wilderness Alliance and packed up and moved to Southeast Utah to a far corner in San Juan County. And I was still working as a wilderness advocate, but also started writing my first book. And a few months later, I went back to Boulder because I'm always going back to Boulder. I've been going there since I was a very little girl with my dad. In fact, the scariest moment of my life is still almost sliding off Hell's Backbone Grill with him driving the company van in a semi mudslide during a bad rainstorm back when the road was really bad. And so I went back and met these two women that had just opened this restaurant in the place that my broken and whole hearts have always lived. And what I met were two young women who had just come out of the Grand Canyon off rafts where they were cooking for river trips. And I'd come down off the rocks that I was climbing. And we had decided to give our lives over to something larger. And we were young women that had all moved to, the three of us had moved to these remote corners of Utah, surrounded by these amazing landscapes. Landscapes that weren't often being talked about in the wilderness community yet as native lands, but I want to be clear that in our time, we've come to recognize and embrace them as that, and see the fullness of both the people and the landscapes that belong to them in a new way. And that has been part of the journey. And we went through this journey together. We learned what it was like to advocate for wild places, living in the thick of it, living with people that didn't agree with us, which was very different than living in Salt Lake and working at a desk and advocating for wilderness. And we kind of came of age in that way, I'd say. And we've been through a lot together personally, politically, professionally, and as if we could ever separate any of those things out. We held each other up a lot. But I don't know that I did such a good job of coming of age as these two did, because what they produced was something that affected so many people. And affected Utah and the whole, like the way that it brought us together and the way it changed the way we think about landscapes and the way we think about the way people inhabit them and the way we think about socially just kinds of businesses, sustainable business models. These women were at the forefront of all of that, and it's been a privilege to watch. Austerity is inherent in my genes. My Mormon ancestors survived their immigration to the West, sometimes eating little more than saddle leather. All of this may help explain my devotion to the Red Rock Desert of Utah's outback, because oh, how spare those landscapes are. Nothing, not a drop of water nor a pinion nut is wasted, and yet one feels in their presence that scenery alone could sustain. And that is until Blake and Jen started to feed us. Then everything changed. Suddenly there was this sacred abundance, and it was in the middle of such a lean landscape, but trail mix and backpackers pantry had always done just fine. And suddenly there was this whole new, what I keep thinking of is like how my ancestors called it, wanted to make the desert blossom like a rose. And you guys literally did that in an incredible kind of way. Those of us who live in small remote towns at the edge of big high desert wilderness know that local economies are not exactly flush, and food, whether you grow, raise, hunt, or truck it in, is not so easy to come by. With the tourists gone and most business fronts shuttered, this cold, dark season should feel like a reprieve. Instead, many people wait with bated but visible breath. Will there be enough? I wrote that last bit in 2017, just before the cookbook came out, but the question now is not just a seasonal one. Climate change and the pandemic have shown us how hard it is for restaurants to stay open due to shortages in the supply chain as well as the workforce. As the climate becomes more extreme, less predictable, gathering to eat good food will become more difficult, in part because growing food will be much more challenging. If anyone is up to the task of ensuring that we might still eat well, that we might still gather in a beautiful place full of kindness, it's Blake and Jen and their corps of hellions. They have received us and fed us with such grace and grit and humor and love in the most impossible, unfavorable conditions. And in the process, they have helped save a national monument and build a business model built on equity and compassion. We are here tonight to celebrate what they have manifested in a world that is in so many ways turned against them, against so many. We are here tonight to thank them for the endurance and kindness and vision they have sustained. We are here tonight to ensure that they can move forward as leaders in the future of food, because I believe that is what they offer, and that's the only way humanity doesn't survive, but thrives. I really believe that. I really believe that the way we've known food is over. And as climate change becomes more perilous and more uncertain, there are a few people that will be able to find a way through this. And the kind of resilience and grit and imagination and fortitude and love that Blake and Jen bring to the restaurant business is like nothing I've ever seen. And we really actually need them to help lead us forward and help us find ways to still make life beautiful and still eat in a way that connects us to the planet that is imperiled. Snow drapes like an ermine stole over bare red shoulders of stone, and every hoot, chirp, and howl is dampened by a dense velvet quiet. What we perfect in winter is a recipe for faith, to trust that this naked raw land on which we can live can produce and nourish. For every species, just enough becomes a prayer, a mantra, a sentiment to live by or die. The question is this: will just enough be enough in time to cool the planet? Must such philosophy relegate us to a geography of impoverishment? In Red Rock country especially, to believe there is more than enough is a radical act. And it requires that we also believe, paradoxically, that not everything is ours for the taking, even as the desert wilds at our back door seem infinite. Just months later, after I first met Blake and Jen, on an evening in late autumn of the first year of that new millennium, I returned to Hell's Backbone Grill again to see my friends, who were wrapping up their first successful season despite significant pushback from the anti-female and anti-wilderness forces that surrounded them. Here's what that looked like. Cowboy in a tall black hat, long and lean as the prime beef cuts he has laid out on the lacquered pine table like an offering. Mysterious braided woman with a thick German tongue unwrapping a tea towel from hot biscuits. Squash, the colors of moonlight and calendula, halved and filled like chests of treasure with wild rice and silvered savory juniper berries. We all bow our heads and thank stars, gods, gardeners, ranchers. We are grateful, wildly so, for this locally procured bounty before us. Outside, the night is like a cold cast iron pan overhead, dark, impenetrable. But inside, with candlelight dancing in the whites of our eyes, everywhere there are possibilities, like scattered pearls, waiting to be gathered and strung.
Thank you. Next, we're going to hear from Regina Lopez-Whiteskunk. Regina Lopez-Whiteskunk was a former co-chair of the Bears Ears Intertribal Coalition. She's been a councilwoman of the Ute Mountain Ute Tribe. She has contributed to several Torrey House Press books, including Red Rock Stories. She has written the foreword to Behind the Bears Ears and a really extraordinary afterword to Desert Cabal, a book by Amy Irvine that features an afterword from Regina Lopez-Whiteskunk and a foreword by Blake Spalding. Regina, as we were talking about this evening and what folks would be talking about, Regina reminded me that meals in so many ways are ceremony, and that there is a piece of community and sacred to the breaking of bread. And I'm delighted to introduce you to Regina Lopez-Whiteskunk, who joins us from Colorado.
I'm going to give you a song, Blake and Jen. I'm going to sing you a song. Yeah, hey oh, hey oh, hey oh, way oh, way oh, way oh, way oh, hi oh, way hi oh, hey, hey oh, hey oh, hey oh. I thought I'd share that with you all. To have met Blake and Amy, as well as Terry, it's been truly a blessing. And for all the years that I have corresponded, whether it was via email or a text message, I always have tried to get over for a long time to be fed at Hell's Backbone Grill. And I finally got to, which was the last day of this past season. And that was probably the most wonderful meal I had. And to breathe in the brisk fall air. And then to be not only fed with warmth gestures, but to be literally wrapped in a blanket by Blake herself. And that was probably one of the most interesting things, because I don't think anybody or any of the cooks or any owner of any restaurant has ever come to greet me and wrap me in a blanket. And I took that literally, but I also took that in a very spiritual way, because there's not very many times in our lives that we literally get to get wrapped in warmth. And so I truly cherish that. And I was very thankful that I finally got to come out and enjoy a meal out there. I truly loved the blue cornmeal muffin. I found out that it was Jen's recipe, one of the best. What can I say? And I've tried many. I've even tried my own recipes many times, but that seems to be the best one. I'm going to read a little bit. Toya, Colorado, fall 2017. I often reflect on the past to understand where it is that will need to be traveled. My grandparents used to tell us, know where you are and where you come from. I always thought my physical address and my parents were all that I needed to know. It was much deeper. Calling, and now I understand. My work as a tribal leader and a co-chair of the Bears Ears Intertribal Coalition has taken me on many journeys with many roads. Some faint at first, just as they appear when you do a flyover of the region. But I had a clear starting point, my commitment to Bears Ears. Still, my journey continued to take me into sometimes unfamiliar territory, testifying at hearings, attending long meetings at the White House and the Department of Interior, and spending countless hours on my laptop as a coalition prepared and then presented to President Obama's administration our proposal for the National Monument Protection. My travels led me back home to my reservation 2 hours from Bears Ears in Toyac, Colorado. I always honored the words of my grandmother, the late Stella Itu. She said, no matter where you go, always remember to come home. Sleeping Ute Mountain, July 13, 2018. The smell of sage and the blessing of rain out on the land. Brilliant red, orange, brown, greens of many shades tell me I'm home again. The colors you don't see when you're in the fast-paced lanes of the metropolitan cities of our nation. I asked myself many times, how are we going to get the well-deserved protection, preservation, and continued access to this sacred area for the people? It appeared impossible. Then on December 28, 2016, President Obama realized our vision and protected her, establishing 1.3 million acres as Bears Ears National Monument. Though it was smaller than 1.9 million acres we proposed, we were pleased that the monument proclamation included co-management with Native leaders. This was such an important moment for the 5 Native nations of the coalition, the 26 Pueblos, and the countless tribes and communities who supported us. Bears Ears had been protected for our people, for all people and creatures, and for future generations. But less than a year later, President Obama's successor stripped away monument status of 85% of the land and revoked tribal management, co-management, dismissing our work for protection and healing. I went to the mountain and prayed. I sat quietly and sang a song. I needed to soothe my uncertainty and sense of being overwhelmed. As I took in the air and felt Mother Earth beneath me, I knew what it was I needed to do. First, have faith in those prayers my grandparents laid out on the land. Second, approach the continuing conversation about Bears Ears with the thought that I had already had her protected. I can work from within as though a national monument still exists with the name of Bears Ears National Monument. With a clear understanding that no matter where the roads will lead us, I cannot enter into conversations defeated. Hope, faith, and grace were the tools that my grandmothers bestowed upon me. As the only woman on the coalition, I had to carry the strength and grace of my grandmothers. Grandmothers whose eyes have witnessed many generations of change to serve our people with hope, gratitude, and love. Resiliency is the key, and we shall continue to be grateful, strong, and full of hope, remembering that the power of the world always works in a circle. The female voice is that of heart and family, of story and place. Today, I bring my story to these pages and a growing circle of leaders, families, hunters, writers, singers, and dancers connecting to our Mother Earth. The sun will rise in the east and set in the west. Some things will never change, but what can be changed is self and purpose. I put my best foot forward to promote peace, love, and harmony for Mother Earth, my neighbors, and all people of this land, and join with others. Our voices rise in prayer, in song. Our stories, old and new, carry on the wind through the pines into the streets and schools and churches, into voting booths and the halls of Congress. Everything now comes full circle. And I believe that a big part of that is fueled by meal, by gathering. And there's so much that I am so thankful for. I am so thankful for having opportunities to share mealtime with Amy, with Blake, with Kirsten and Mark, Terry and Brooke, and many of you yet to be a part of those gatherings. I look forward to those days. I hold grace, I hold faith, and I hold prayers close. And I do have the greatest of prayers for things to happen in the way they're supposed to. Nothing happens coincidentally. It's a part of a bigger plan, and we have to have faith in that. And we do it together. My grandmother always said, we don't get anywhere alone, good or bad. We'll get through it because we need each other. Thank you, Blake. Thank you, Jen.
Regina Lopez-Whiteskunk, thank you. Thank you so much. like to thank all of you who are joining us and sharing about the GoFundMe. Thanks to everybody who is making a donation this evening, who has made a donation up to this point. Each of you is making a big difference to the community that Blake and Jen have built. We will next turn to Brooke Williams and Terry Tempest Williams. They are joining us together in one screen, but they're going to offer some words separately. First, we'll hear from Brooke, who I believe was instrumental in some of the early beam hangings of the restaurant way back in the day, building the actual restaurant with Blake and Jen. And Brooke and Terry have been longtime friends of Hell's Backbone Grill and Blake Spalding and Jen Castle. Brooke Williams.
Thank you, Kirsten. I so appreciate Torrey House Press. I'm so grateful to be among this group. I'm honored. That's right, I did help with one beam in the restaurant. It was a really big beam. And the only reason I got to help is that I was just a body standing around. But I did really, I was really amazed by the construction of that place and the whole Boulder Mountain Lodge and everything that's happened since. I want to put all this into a little bit of context, mainly personal. I've loved wilderness for most of my life. My first backpacking trip was to Stevens Canyon in what is now the Grand Staircase-Escalante National Monument in 1973. This marks the beginning of my advocacy for wildness. Since rural leaders constantly argued that protecting the region's wild places would damage their extractive economies, I thought that discovering and encouraging new and different non-extractive enterprises might quell or eliminate obstacles to wilderness protection, including national monument designation. Discussions around protecting the vast region, including the Grand Staircase, has been ongoing since the 1930s, when the 7,000 square mile Escalante National Monument was proposed by President Franklin Roosevelt's administration. My relationship with Blake and Jen actually began years before I met them, the early 90s. I was part of a small organization dedicated to what we call compatible economic development. Ecotourism seemed like the perfect focus. Escalante, Boulder, and the towns along Highway 12 seemed like the perfect locations. The designation of Grand Staircase-Escalante National Monument highlighted and then intensified our work. This is from my book that was published in 2006. It's September 18th, 1996, the day of the monument proclamation. I was part of a group at Louise Liston's living room talking about the potential for what we call compatible economic development, projects and businesses not based on natural resource extraction, yet set up to provide employment in rural areas. I first met Louise in the late 80s, kept me confused ever since. She has taught me many lessons. The most important of that issues that separate people are fewer than those that bind us, that we share more than we don't. In the middle of our conversation, Louise suddenly picked up her remote control and switched on the television to the beginning of the ceremony wherein President Clinton would read a proclamation creating the Grand Staircase-Escalante National Monument. Louise was having a bad day. Fortunately, someone had leaked secret information about the proclamation, and it did not come as a complete surprise. At the time, Louise was one of 4 Garfield County commissioners, all of whom believed that their right to work the land and make a living from it should transcend the federal government's right to, in effect, to condemn it by protecting it, by giving it status of park or wilderness or national monument. I realized that day in Louise's living room, watching the ceremony taking place on the south rim of the Grand Canyon, that in this little town of Escalante and in Boulder and in all the other towns strung out like beads along Highway 12, most everyone hated the idea. On the south rim, everyone, the leaders of the American environmental movement, President Clinton, Robert Redford, and according to Louise, everyone but the Unabomber loved it. The room dimmed when the camera shifted and panned the cliffs at the Grand Canyon. The mood changed. We watched 3 speeches announcing the monument. Throughout, Louise and her husband Robert were much more polite than I would have been had the situation been reversed. It could have been worse, they announced. When it was over, we all shook hands and Louise and I hugged. A few of us decided that we had worked enough that day and it was time for a hike. We chose the Gulch, now protected, now part of the Grand Staircase-Escalante National Monument. I doubt that the Gulch's newly protected status had anything to do with it, but I seemed to be moving smoother than usual, not an ache or a pain. I lead a small group across the creek twice before veering right up through the break in the lowest cliff. I act as though I have a destination, which I don't, only a goal to absorb as much of the new freedom of this place as possible. The desert changes things. While hiking, we talked about how the desert changes things. We talked about the new monument, and what changes might come from it. We talk about people like Louise Liston who want desperately to keep their quiet rural lifestyles, their unquestioned access to the resources of this wide country, their children and grandchildren all together thriving in these strange small towns. And eventually the desert changes things. In 2 hours, we were back in the car. In 3, we were back at watching the news for reports on the monument. In a few months, the planning would begin, everyone wanting their values represented. In a year, Harriet Priska, who owned the gift shop and gallery in Escalante, would be quoted as saying that increased business since the monument designation had allowed her to pay off her mortgage 3 years early. New guide businesses selling maps and gear would begin to appear on Main Street, Escalante. A new bed and breakfast would be built and developers would begin looking for land to build an eco lodge just like Costa Rica. Later, I would be hired to find stories of how the monument changed everything. An outfitter would tell me that new regulations made business impossible, but the owner of a new bed and breakfast would be adding 4 rooms. And Harriet Priska, now she would be wondering if the increased business was due to monument designation or to the fact that she started selling petrified wood. Change comes slowly in the desert. Soon after the monument designation, the Boulder Mountain Lodge opened, built by locals of local and non-toxic materials designed to provide modern, comfortable accommodations specifically for those experiencing the area's wild landscape. Winter 2000, Blake and Jen moved to Boulder, taking over the Hell's Backbone Grill located at the Boulder Mountain Lodge. They seemed fearless and serious and formidable, intimidating, possibly because I sensed they knew something I would not articulate until later. Compatible economic development is still development, and the tourist industry is in general just another extractive industry. And the argument over economy pales compared to questions of who is in charge and who controls the future. As I got to know them, I found that Blake and Jen are people I want to become. They embody the conscious evolution that may be our only salvation. Using their imaginations and skills and open to the magic and influence of a big, wild place, they create right livelihood. They save the world. The designation of the Grand Staircase-Escalante National Monument has changed the culture. Blake Spalding and Jen Castle and their restaurant, the Hell's Backbone Grill, are changing consciousness.
Thank you. Brooke, were you reading from Open Midnight?
No, it's called Escalante, the Best Kind of Nothing.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you, thank you. Now we are going to close our evening with Terry Tempest Williams. Terry is the author of many books, important books, meaningful books, including Refuge, Hour of Land, most recently Erosion, and a few years ago, along with her spouse, Brooke Williams, and Richard Jeffries, The Story of My Heart. Terry has said she can hardly remember a time when she didn't know Blake and Jen, that the friendship goes so deep, so far, and so meaningfully into her being. Terry Tempest Williams, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Kirsten.
Amy, thank you for bringing us together. It's hard to find the words, but I look at Amy, I look at Pam, I look at Regina, Kirsten, Blake, and Jen, and I see my sisters. I feel like in so many ways we've raised each other, and it is a family in all its complexity and depth and beauty. And I just want you to know how much I respect you, how much I honor you, and how much I continue to learn from you. I think it's important and blessings to all of you who have joined us in the name of community, for you to know the power of Blake and Jen and the courage it takes to run a business in rural Utah, and the grace and generosity that they have brought to one of the most hostile landscapes I've known living in Utah all my life. Garfield County was the toughest, I think. And I see how you have changed it and how you have changed us in the process of your deep residency in that community. I think of you as gift givers. I can't count the boxes we have received from you at just the moment. And as I shared before, my father was taken to the hospital by ambulance, and we didn't know if he was going to make it through what appeared to be a stroke, but he did come home. And the offering there to Brooke and me from Blake and Jen was the offering we could then share in the name of reciprocity to our family. And Brooke made the blue corn pancakes. I, set the table, and we broke bread together in a moment of deep family gratitude. And you are a part of that. Whenever anyone comes to Utah, they'll say, where should we go? First and foremost, it's Hell's Backbone Grill. And we give them your names and your phone numbers and where they can stay. And it honors all of us, because I think people think stereotypically of Utah, but you bring us all home to what is not only possible, but necessary. I'm aware that our battery is going to die. So, excuse us. In thinking what to share tonight, I wanted to read something that you have influenced. And Blake, I don't know if you'll remember, but it set a tone for the pandemic that changed everything for me. I remember the quality of light. I was sitting on the bed, and we talked about shadows. We talked about depression. We talked about love. We talked about what does it mean to be a woman in Utah at this moment in time. And this is for you. This is for you, Jen. Jen, I think about your fierce intelligence and the times that I've seen you in the kitchen through the decades with this brilliance, and especially the magic of the chocolate chili mousse. And I just want you to know both of your influences in this, as well as Regina, as well as Pam, as well as Amy, as well as Kirsten. It's called What My Body Knows, What Our Bodies Know Together. The story my body wants to tell is that my body and the body of Earth are one. Our power and the power of Earth are intrinsically bound in generosity and regeneration, not scarcity and sacrifice. Renewal, abundance, retreat, and restoration are the seasons within us. But we forget what real power looks like, because the power of the patriarchy has disguised what hurts us as what we deserve. The assaults on our bodies are akin to the assaults wounding the body of Earth. But we are human, and that alone makes us complicit in the degradation and sacrilege of nature. Atonement is possible. The story my body wants to tell is that she is tired. She is tired of running on fumes, the same fumes killing the planet by burning coal and oil and gas. The story of my body is exhaustion. Am I listening? She is telling me the energy I count on is a false energy, a lie sputtering from the flames of sheer will, fear, and illusion. The story my body wants to tell is that she is grieving. She is sick from not being heard or seen or cared for, while I am taking care of everyone else but my own beloved body, my one and only body, flesh of my flesh called Earth. My body understands I take her for granted. And why wouldn't I? As women, we are conditioned to believe there is divine purpose in busyness and distraction, forgetting ourselves, forgetting the soul needs of our children, the soil, the air, savannas and forests, wetlands and oceans. My body is my collaborator, whether I think about her or not. She continues to construct my health and well-being in the blood and bones of my body, even as my nervous system registers danger and adrenal glands sound the alarm. Every muscle and organ is inflamed with the heartache of this beautiful burning world. The story my body wants to tell is a warning. Our bodies and the body of Earth are changing quickly, alchemically, through the violence of climate collapse. We are supporting a collective death by suicide. But our Indigenous sisters, like the women of Bears Ears, Regina, you among them, mentors in the Red Rock Desert, are committed to the rematriation of Mother Earth, bringing forth harmony and wholeness from the wisdom and ceremonies passed on to them through generations, now sharing them. New rituals tapping the hearts of women worldwide are being born commensurate with this moment. Our ancestors are with us. With our hands on the earth, we as women will know what to do. The story my body wants to tell is the story of love. It is time to lay our bodies down on the mother and defend her creation, our mother. We breathe ourselves back into the insistence of beauty. Our tears will fall as rain in the desert, in sorrow and relief. We will rise drenched in joy and lead. Our bodies on earth, of earth, for earth, will be fearless, keening and singing, chanting and dancing, circling the planet in defiance and prayer as our stay against extinction, both human and wild. We locate the pulse that refuses to cease, because what our bodies know is this: life follows life. Jan and Blake, bless you for your leadership of the heart, for your spiritual leadership, and for all you continue to give us and nurture us with. It is sacrament.
Terry Tempest Williams, thank you. Thank you. And thanks to all of you who have joined us. So many of you have donated over the last couple of months and during the last hour to help Hell's Backbone Grill continue to be the pillar of a community that so many people can participate in and be nurtured by. Blake and Jen, thank you for creating this community. I've certainly been fed in so many ways, and I'm going to let you take a few moments before we close just to tell us a little bit about what your hopes are and what this community rallying has meant for you and how we can all help.
Well, thank you, Kirsten, and thank you, everyone. I mean, I'm kind of undone. That was a lot. This whole last 6 weeks has been a lot. I think that, kind of the last, really, it has been 7 years since, since the monument came under attack, and then the subsequent pandemic have been really challenging for us. And we've been doing exactly kind of what Terry was just talking about, just pushing and really like willing it into being. And with, I think we always pretended. It was never easy. I think there was this sort of idea that we had that things were eventually going to get easier, and they really haven't. In fact, I would say they've gotten appreciably harder. And I don't think that's unique to us. I think, that's sort of maybe a little bit of the experience that people are having right now with the world as things are changing, and there's more anger and more difficulty, more strife, and certainly as the harm that's been done to the planet starts to bear that very defiled and disturbed fruit. So it has gotten harder. I want to say that when Jen and I talked about the initial sort of success of the GoFundMe, what was really clear to us was that, almost as important, maybe not as practically important, but in terms of like the overall value, was sort of the feeling that that our work has mattered, and that it still matters to people, and that there's this sort of general goodwill that people would like us to keep going. And I don't know how long we'll be able to keep going. This fundraiser has solved a very big problem, but it solves really for 1 year. And so there's a lot of other thorny kind of complexities that we have to untangle and try to solve. And I think, Jen will speak a little bit to some of those, but the big part is that we feel very loved, we feel seen, we feel held and supported. This hearing from all of you was like my heart is bursting. I was trying to keep it together. It's really tender to hear from everybody, and it's been tender. We've gotten hundreds of letters from people and phone calls and texts and the messages on the GoFundMe. I want to really take a minute and acknowledge that our staff, our core staff, have been with us through a lot. And, we definitely need to add to our staff because they are fatigued, and we need to hire like 12 to 14 people to get open in March, and that's soon. They need to be really good people, skilled people. Like it's super sweet when people want to come and volunteer for a couple of weeks, but what we really need is hardcore restaurant professionals. I want to also say that it has been really a journey with my sister too, Lavinia, who co-wrote our cookbooks with us and who has been our like main champion through our GoFundMe. Lavinia Spalding, she's the truest, bluest sister. I'm not even sure if she's on right now because she's trying to get my nephew to sleep. But if you are, Lavinia, we love you so much. And and to our core Hellions, thank you. It's been quite a journey, and to everyone who comes to the restaurant year after year after year, and it's amazing. We have ourselves quite a powerful community.
Blake,
Did I freeze? Sorry.
I think there was a freezing, but I think you're back.
Yeah, I think the thing that we always say, and I'll end with this, is just that, like, really, what is the point if we're not doing things out of love? So love for the food, love for the people we serve it to, love for the people we work with, love for the community, and most deeply for me of all is love for this planet. There is no love for me as great as my love for Mother Earth, except maybe my love for my business partner, Jen. My true blue, my best. We've been through so much, and she's just, that's the thing I'm like the most maybe proud of everything, is that our business partnership and friendship is just like so strong and good and pure. We really, really care for one another and our project. And so thank you, Jen. Thank you, everyone.
Blake and Jen, thank you. Thank you for all you do. You feed us all. Thanks to all of you who have joined us this evening for this wonderful, wonderful celebration and fundraiser. So many of you have donated this evening and over the course of the last week and the last 6 weeks. It's so important for Hell's Backbone Grill to sustain. We all need to be a part of this community, and here's some things that you can do. You can make a donation to the GoFundMe. You can share the fact that you made a donation and encourage others to be a part of this community. Encourage folks to work at Hell's Backbone Grill. Do you know people who have restaurant experience? Do you have restaurant experience? It's hard work and it's amazing work, and you get to work with Blake and Jen in the desert. March 10th is the day. So please be thinking about how you can help recruit some restaurant folks who want to live in a remote place. Staffing is difficult for everyone in this pandemic, but particularly hard in remote areas. But goodness, it's beautiful. And another thing that you can do to help support Blake and Jen is buy from their stores. Several Torrey House Press books are in the store. And visit the restaurant in 2023. The opening day is, I believe, March 17, and it's going to be fantastic. The Torrey House Press board and staff, we were just so delighted to have our first in-person board meeting this October, and we had a celebratory dinner at the restaurant on its last night. It was kind of chilly, but it was fantastic. And we're kind of looking forward to trying to get there for the opening night of the next season. So put Hell's Backbone Grill and Grand Staircase-Escalante on your calendar for some joy and some love and the food that each of us needs. Tonight, thank you. Thanks to our wonderful writers, to Craig Childs and Pam Houston and Amy Irvine, Regina Lopez-Whiteskunk, Brooke Williams, Terry Tempest Williams. Thank you, Blake Spalding, Jen Castle for feeding us. Thanks to all of you who joined us for this beautiful evening. There will be a recording, and we will share that link with all of you who registered and with the folks at Hell's Backbone Grill, and it'll be on the Torrey House Press website as well. For each of you, light in the darkness. Find some wonderful things to eat tonight.
And may everyone have a very beautiful, happy New Year. We're going to leave the GoFundMe up until February 21st, which is Tibetan New Year, Losar. And then that day we'll take it down and we'll hang prayer flags and make aspirations for a smooth and beautiful new year. And we just, again, want to thank everyone from the bottom of our hearts. So grateful, so beautiful, so tender. Can't believe it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone.